Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to build your very own PBR Texture Scanner. This thing's super portable and I built it on a budget, cost around $250 or so in materials, and I'll show you how it works and how you can build your own to make your own PBR materials for your own projects. Let's go. When I built this, my main idea was to make something really portable. I wanted to be able to take this everywhere I went very easily. It straps to my backpack, and yeah, I can throw it in a suitcase, and I can throw it on, throw it on an airplane very easily. It's really durable. So this thing's been around. I built it probably about 3-4 years ago now, and yeah, it comes with me everywhere. I go camping, I'll bring it. It's very, very maneuverable, and that was my main goal behind all this, was to get something that really is easy to carry around, and yeah, portability. All right, let's open it up and see how it's made. So the first part to this thing is the control board. It all wraps up in this nice little bag for easy transportation. On the battery pack, we have our main power switch that drives power into the control board. In here I have a splitter that runs a line to each switch, which then in turn comes out of this end as 8 different cords. It's a pretty basic setup, but it works well. The main power switch will, let me just make sure it's on. Main power switch will allow me to then activate each light individually. To switch to auxiliary, I turn this off, and I can now switch 2 extra auxiliary cords for the light, which I'm currently using to light this video, but this also comes off and has a dimmer to get the subsurface and transparency attributes of materials. I don't take that with me everywhere. I only pretty much take that out with me when I'm doing foliage, or if I have to scan fabrics and stuff. It does a really nice job. But yeah, that's the basic setup. The nice thing is this thing is on with Velcro. So it's easy to remove, and I can take it off, charge it, take it back, just plop it back on very easily. Velcro is kind of magical for stuff like that. Plug my power in, and I'm ready to go. So the umbrella is really light, so throwing this in a suitcase isn't really an issue and not going to add a lot of weight to your luggage. Which is nice, because I always planned and made this thing to be able to travel with. I wanted this, I didn't want to be limited to Canada. So yeah, opening this up, you just pull the cover off, undo the Velcro. Then it has these little metal rods that stick out, so you just pull up on those until you hear a little snap. And there. So it's just your standard light hood that I spray painted black on the inside. As you can see, some of that is chipping off. My original idea was to glue a fabric on the inside, which now in hindsight I kind of wish I did, but still works great. And maybe I'll disassemble it and and do that, or maybe just buy a new light hood might be just better. But yeah, so what I did is I bought a roll of LED string lights, and they come with adhesive backing. So I just peeled the adhesive strip and glued those in. What I did is I drilled 8 holes in the top plastic piece, so so I could run the wiring. And this top piece is just a piece of tubing I got from the hardware store. Fits right on here. I took my Dremel tool and kind of cut out these notches out of it, so it just slides right in. And I can just twist it on, and yeah, so that can come off if you do need. Maybe, you know, if you need to travel with it a bit more compact, it is possible. I generally leave this on for the most part. But yeah, that is the umbrella. And then yeah, this top part, like I said, is just a pipe. And then I think these are mostly parts from an old TV mount. Some extra pieces that I had kicking around in the garage. So these are just spacers. I just bought some bolts. And I think this is just, yeah, a bracket, literally just a metal piece with a groove in the middle. So that allows me to bolt things on, as you can see here. I'll do a better closer up. But yeah, and then again, Arca Swiss mount on the end here with a little spacer, which sets my camera. This is kind of fit to my camera, so my lens sits exactly on the center of that, the hole. So yeah, and just grab my camera. It's pretty easy to attach that. So like I said, just drop it into the Arca Swiss plate, tighten it up. Hard to do with one hand, but yeah, and camera just locks in there, and it's pretty solid. I have some pretty big washers on the inside of that pipe to kind of help support it, and it's solid. I just carry it by this handle here, and yeah, that's how that all is hooked up. And then yeah, all these wires, then they're all labeled. So yeah, they go from 1 to 8. And then what I've done on my control board, the cables coming out, those are all labeled 1 to 8 as well. And you can see on the control board itself, I have labels 1 through 8. So I know 1 is calibrated to be at the top here. So from my camera right above it is going to be 1, and then it goes through clockwise to 8. That's important because when we go to process it, we have to make sure that we specify which direction. They have to be sequential, and you have to specify which direction the lights are going in. This will make more sense when I get to the part where I show you how I process these. All right, let's show you a bit of a closer up view of this. There. I'm all set up here. I've plugged my power and control board into the umbrella using all the cords, and I've also attached this extra light for the bottom through the auxiliary cord. And this runs through a dimmer switch here that I can use to control the intensity of that light. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece of cloth. This is what I'm going to be scanning with you today. So I'm going to take this piece of cloth, I'm going to lay it over this light. What I'm going to do is just make sure that there's as little amount of wrinkles as possible over the center of the light. I'm just going to set this up and just lay it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my umbrella and now I'm going to set it over top. There we go. What I'll do now is I'll just power on my camera. Make sure the power on my battery is on, primary power, and I'll just activate light 1. I'll switch to live mode and just make sure that I'm centered on the light. Right now I'm at about a focal length of 24-ish, so that seems to frame it fairly well. And I've set my exposure to work with this one light on. So usually I'll do a high f-stop of around f10, ISO 100, and this I'm doing a shutter speed of about 1.3. Since this is locked off, I don't need to worry about, you know, motion blur or anything potentially blurring my photos. One thing I do have on the side here, I have a little, again, piece of Velcro that holds a remote control trigger for my camera. So I don't need to make contact with this setup at all. I can do everything just with my control board and using the remote control to trigger the camera. So with all that set up, what I want to do is I want to just kind of have it, make sure my camera is switched to autofocus. And I'm going to just use live view here and just autofocus on the subject and make sure that that is in focus. Once it's focused, I'll switch it back to manual focus, just so it's not changing in between. Now that the focus is locked, I don't need to be using autofocus. So once that's set up, I can make sure my camera is set to remote control. So just setting that, and now we should be good to go. So taking the first photo, switching to the second light, taking a photo again, switching to the third light, the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth. What I do now is I'll activate the auxiliary one that will give me the light from underneath. And what this will give me is a transparency or a subsurface or translucency map. So here I can adjust the brightness of the light, all depending on how thick the subject I'm scanning is. So in this sense, it's fairly thin, so I'll do somewhere in the middle. And I'll take a photo too. And then after that, what I usually do is I'll take one that's completely black, and that will just mark the end of this particular scan. So let's have a look at what the texture scanner kicked out and what kind of data we have to work with. I've loaded up the images. I've put them on my hard drive actually, and then loaded them up into Lightroom. So you can see here what we have is our 8 different photos with the different directions of light. And then we have our 9th photo with our backlight. And this is going to give us our kind of transparency map. So what I want to do here is I'm going to just navigate to our backlight one, and I'm going to go into crop, and I want to switch this to 1:1, and I'm just going to crop in on this a bit. I'm going to get a little bit of black corners here. I'm going to try and avoid it, but that's okay. If it gets a little darker, I'm going to end up removing the edges anyway to make it tilable. So that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to hit enter to lock that in. I'm going to select them all and sync them. I want to make sure I have crop selected and synchronize. So now that we have those, I'm going to just select these, export, and I'm going to choose my folder, and I've created a crop folder here. I'm going to just select that folder and export. I already did an export of this to test it, so I'm just going to overwrite this. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up Substance Designer. Minimize that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new substance graph. I'm going to choose the Scan Processing Metallic Roughness template, and I'm just going to call this Fabric Scan. Brick Scan. And I'm going to choose 4K, click OK. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us this setup graph. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the input count on all these nodes to 8, since we took 8 images for this. And going to connect them. What I do is I save this out as a template. So every time I start a scan, I just load up that file, and then it's just a bit quicker, saves this step. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to navigate to my folder and where I exported those cropped images. I'm going to just select them all and drag them in, and I'm going to say link resource, okay. There. So now you should see all your images. Just double check that they come in order. Sometimes I find that it might drop one to the back. This time looks good. You want the first light to be at the top. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the output of these, and I'm just going to put it into input 1 and continue down, putting each file into the next input. Cool. So as I kind of split the difference here, what you can see here is out of the gate, we get a pretty decent normal map. Now, this does need some adjusting, because right now we have our light starting at the top here, but our first sample count is set to be 90 degrees to the other side. So I'm just going to set this to 0. And, oh, sorry, 90 degrees. There we go, that looks better. If we just zoom in here, we can actually see some of the effect that it has. I like to put the intensity to 1. And if we just have a look here, we can see, yeah, that's looking pretty good. Right now our roughness is way too low. So I'm gonna just crank that for this one. There we go. Okay, so here, one thing we can change depending on your render engine, OpenGL, will flip the Y channel or DirectX. In this case, I'm going for OpenGL. Yeah. And then what that will do is also give you this delit base color pass. Substance does also include these kind of smart auto tiles. I don't like them. Oops, did not want to do the delete the normal to height. I don't like them because I don't find they work very well in here, just out of my experience. So I just generally bypass those. And yeah, so I've disconnected the normal here. I want to just connect that back into my normal channel. And my color into base color. There. Yeah, so you can see here a lot of detail in there. It got like every single little bump. That perfectly lines up to our albedo pass. What I like to do here, depending on the material, this is going to be a very rough material, but here I will do a grayscale conversion. Take my albedo pass. So the thing is that this does not allow you to export a or to capture a roughness pass. So I tend to kind of cheat one a bit, and this works fairly well. So usually, depending on the material, I'll just invert these and then just kind of play with it until we get something that works well. In this case, it's going to be very rough, but having some variation in there is always nice. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go and I'm going to check in the iRay renderer. Might be a bit too glossy still, just give it a bit more. Just so it has some variation. It does seem here that it is actually inverting my my bump, so I'm going to try and switching this to OpenGL as well. I think it's actually DirectX. Well, eventually I do most of this in Maya or Unreal, so just not sure why that seems to be inverted, or is it just the lighting that's tricking me? Let's try a different one. Also try something a little more contrasty for lighting. No. Let's try this. Actually, something. No. Very low lit. There we go. Oh no, that's looking good. It's just the lighting that's throwing it off. I'll try the array renderer here. That still feels a bit glossy to me, but again, we don't want to completely kill all detail out of this, so I'm gonna stay with that for now, and then I can always just kind of tweak it afterwards in my whatever render engine I end up in. That's looking pretty good. You get a lot of nice detail. So this works really well for generating different kind of like micro normal detail normals. So one thing we still need to do now is just kind of make this tilable. So let's go ahead and do that. So here what I'm going to do is I'm just going to export these outputs. Going to just navigate to my folder. I'm going to do output here. Do designer. I should do a version just in case I need to go back and do another one. And I just have these three. I'm going to export outputs as TIFF. Okay. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually fire up Substance Painter to make these tilable. So I'm just grabbing my Substance Painter. I'm going to create just a new graph. I'm going to select the mesh. So what I've done here is I've gone into Maya and just exported a plane with the UVs in exactly 0 to 1 space. And I just load that in as my base object. And yeah, just default settings and click OK. So I end up with a substance like this. So what I do now is I just navigate to where I exported those, take these three and just drag them into my library here, add resources, whoops, excuse me, sorry, select texture and add into this project. Great. So I'm going to go into my layers here and just delete that paint layer. I'm going to create a fill layer. And here I'm going to scroll down to my channels and I'm just going to drop in my channels. So this is my height, my normal, and my roughness. So looking good. If I just spin my lighting around, getting a lot of nice detail. But now we want to make this tile. So the way I like to do that is I like to go in here, I'll call this base, and I'll actually copy and paste that fill layer, and I'll call this offset. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that layer and I'm going to offset these by 0.5 on each axis. So now I have this offset and now you can see the seams in the middle. What I like to do now is I like to add a white mask, and into that white mask I'll create a paint. So here what I'll do is I'll just get my Wacom and I will just start painting out the seams. Make sure it's set to black, and I'm just going to paint these seams out. Now you can take as much time as you want on this. I'm going to do this rather quickly. But something like that. You want to be careful not to get too close to these edges. But I'm gonna kind of erase the center here, just to bring that back. That's looking pretty good. Always kind of rotating my light just to make sure. Now, one thing you do need to do and be aware of is you need to change the blending mode of your height to normal and your normal to normal as well. Otherwise, you're going to get the stacking channels. That should be pretty seamless now. Maybe a bit here. Oh, just make sure I have my paint layer selected. There we go. So what I'll do from here, you can just double check each channel now just to make sure nothing wonky going on. Looks pretty good, and this is the combined. That's my mask. Maybe I'll just kind of clean up the center. Generally, I try to avoid like too much transparency in these masks, just to kind of, so you know, your texture isn't blending and on top of itself. There. I like to do it this way just because I can control kind of where it blends. Otherwise, the Smart Auto Tile in Substance Designer just kind of does this blending from the edges, which I don't like. So now I'm going to go just File, Export Textures, and Output Template. I'm just going to do just the standard Arnold is fine. Or you can create your own, but just PBR metallic roughness is fine. I guess emissive we don't need, and metallic we don't need. So what I can also do here, my mesh, I'm going to okay, so I'm gonna PBR metallic roughness, export as I'm just gonna do TIFF. I'll do 16-bit, why not? And I'm gonna do, make sure I'd select 4K, and make sure I choose my path. Again, always version. And I'm just going to save these settings real quick. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to rename my texture set to Pbr Scan. That way when I file export textures, you can see here in our template, it's actually set to mesh texture set. So what I can actually do is just remove the mesh out of my naming here. Oh, whoops, that is the wrong preset. I want to do PBR metallic roughness here. Just going to remove mesh. And here, since I did save settings, it should export. You can see now it's going to name it accordingly. It does do UDIM on there. This is not a UDIM texture, but it's fine. So there.
And now, just to try this, what I like to do is close this, and I'll put put a new fill layer down, and I will just navigate to my output of Painter, just drag these in. Again, set to texture. This project, that's fine. And now I'm going to just connect these to this fill layer. And what I can do here, with that selected, I can flip this to UV projection, and now I can start tiling. And you can see that now I can tile this out. One thing that I find does help is, especially for fabrics like this, you can, sometimes kill the base color and do your own base color. That does work. And I'm looking at, right now this is only 1K, but we get a very high res version of this if I just plug that base color back in. Oh, there we go. So very high res textures that we're able to get. And obviously, yeah, it's depending on your material, the tiling is gonna be more apparent or whatever, but you can get around that, and yeah, it works well. Now the normal might be a bit intense, and here just go into painting mode. If I just flip my height, maybe I want to reduce my height a bit, and also, my normal map, I can bring that down here if I like, just to test. That feels a bit better. One quick thing that I forgot to mention is how I work in the opacity map. I just bring that in right from my export, so you can see that here. And I just went over into my texture settings, just click plus, and I added, or actually, sorry, I scrolled down here, and just added the opacity channel. And that should now make the opacity channel available in both these layers, and then I just drop in the opacity texture here. And then what I did do is actually drop a levels on. So if I look at the raw opacity, if I just delete these, that's what it gave me. So it's actually inverted because, yeah, the light coming through is going through the thinner areas. So I just added on a levels here. I'm just pasting my levels with my settings already applied. So I inverted the values, and then just lifted up my darks a lot, just to give me something like this. And the nice thing is now if I go into, like, say, the iRay mode, and if I just swing around to the other side, this is too much compared to the actual practical cloth. It's actually it's not too far off. You're always good idea to use your practical cloth as reference if you're able to hang on to the cloth while you're setting these up. Sometimes, if you're doing these for a production or something, you might not have, but yeah, that seems, somewhat close. Still, I think I can, reduce it a bit, but that seems to work pretty good. And then I would just export that along. So again, doing the same thing. I'm just going to delete that one. I'm going to go File, Export Textures. This time I want to make sure that I have the PBR metallic roughness. I want to make sure that I add the opacity. So I'm just going to select that. Like that. I'm going to do opacity. And I have nothing connected here, so I am going to drop that in here. Oh, it looks like it did. It is set up in the alpha channel of my base color. I like to do it as its own. So, yeah. And then, cool. So I'll just go here to export. You can see now opacity is part of that. So yeah, that's how I create these kind of highly detailed normal maps and albedo maps, and create PBR materials that you can use in your projects. And I hope, the breakdown of the texture scanner and the process of taking the images, bringing them into Substance Designer, and then into Substance Painter, and then creating tiled textures. I hope that that inspires you guys to make your own and start building your own library of all these different scans that that can be highly useful for all kinds of CG projects. So thanks for checking it out, and I'll see you next time.